So, yep, Manju, would love to know your journey.
Thank you. So yeah, I started my career in 2010. Um, I was initially working here in India for a startup called Excellent Technologies, and Excellent at that point of time was a small organization. However, Apple was the client of Excellent, and I ended up starting to work with them since 2010. In 2013, like between 2010 and 2013, we worked on a bunch of products. In fact, actually one huge product of Apple, which is used both internally and used by developers and different third party who interact with Apple. For example, Apple has this supplier chain, including Foxconn, Winstron, Intel, for supplying various different things. And the product that I was working on back then um, was used by all these different suppliers, was also used by developers, building for Apple, building for iPhone, building for the Mac, and so on and so forth. 2013 is when I moved to the US, working out of Cupertino from the Apple HQ. That was an amazing experience as well. Was able to interact with a lot of amazing people inside Apple. One of the highlight there was one of the sessions that we were doing with Craig Federighi, who's still there with Apple, and the SVP of software engineering and all of iOS, in fact. Amazing journey. And again, back when in 2015, I was getting bored working with a single product, trying to see what's next for me, trying to do something different. That's when I, had this opportunity with Atlassian. And Devang, you mentioned about Bitbucket. Bitbucket was the first product that I actually worked as part of my role in Atlassian. This was 2015, yeah, between 2015 and 2018, actually. So yeah, since then I've moved on and worked on different products. Initially Bitbucket, then we also had this small product called SourceTree, which was a client used for any Git client, for example, GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, or whatever it is. Worked on that, worked on developing and scaling that to new heights, specifically on the Mac client. We were only 4 developers on that product, serving close to like 2 million daily active users. And there was not a huge support team as well as such. And, people would be surprised if when I say that we used to talk to our users. Hey, one request when people are joining in, if you can kindly mute yourself, that
Yep.
would really help. Thank you. So that was an amazing experience because just being a 4-member team or a team of small of 4 people, we even used to have interactions with the customers directly with our users. Sometimes help them with resolving certain things at their end. And there are even cases where we have actually responded to user queries on Twitter handles and whatnot. So that gave us not just an engineering experience, but a wide variety of product building experience. We used to look at different metrics, what is working well, what are some of the things that people are requesting, kind of prioritize on some of the features, and then build a roadmap, and then go and build those things from the roadmap. It was an amazing experience. Then on Bitbucket, I think specifically on Bitbucket Cloud, there was this journey of moving from our own data center into AWS. And for anybody who's working on the networking side and storage side, um, moving huge repositories and then files from one storage to another storage with minimal disruption, not having huge amount of latency changes. Having a data center would give you a lot of control over what you can and what you cannot do. But moving to shared infrastructure or cloud, while it comes with advantages of reduced cost and whatnot, but doing the migration itself is a huge challenge. So that was one of the other things that I was able to contribute and was really satisfying to be a part of. 2019, in fact, Atlassian decided to start its India operations in 2018, and that's when we were having many of these discussions. It was announced a little earlier before the public knew. So we back then our CTO was also from Bangalore, and we used to work very closely. It was a much smaller company as compared to today, and he kind of once asked if I was interested in moving, and in fact at that point I'd been there for about 6 years, was thinking of my parents being a little old, how to manage things from different country and all that in case of emergencies. So when this came up, I did express my interest, and then over a period of time, we figured out a way for me to come to India and then essentially help Atlassian build and set up teams here in India. So one of the teams on the product that we were able to move here to India was Marketplace. Marketplace is a storefront, and just like maybe Amazon Marketplace or Flipkart, it's an e-commerce platform where third-party developers who build apps and integrations for Atlassian products like Bitbucket, Jira, Confluence, could come and sell whatever they build. And what we do is we provide them, one, of course, storefront itself where they could actually list and then market, but also the whole back end of payment gateways, integrations, collecting at the time of sale as well as renewal payments from the users, and give them reporting around who is buying what, like how many customers or how many users are there on a particular instance of Jira or a Confluence that is buying, how many renewals are happening. Every business data that we could potentially capture and then provide it to the seller, we would do that. So I moved to that team here as part of my transition to India, and I was on the same marketplace team until March of this year. And we made various different improvements, added new features, and a whole bunch of things. In March of 2023, I moved to what is called as the commerce platform, where we are actually building. Sorry, could you
Yep.
please go on mute?
Yep, Hari requesting you to go on mute. Divya, can you just ensure that everyone who newly joins in is muted? Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So on the commerce platform, we are building a billing platform inside Atlassian, which is used basically to sell everything that is sold through Atlassian. Now, that could be a product that we develop, for example, Jira, or a product that that was developed by a third party, let's say an integration or an app, and even services. For example, Atlassian has primarily uh, done all three hosting options: server, data center, and cloud. But we've stopped selling server. We still continue to sell on data center, because some of the customers have their own compliance needs and cannot be on cloud, which is why we continue to sell on a data center. So um, we we have an existing platform which was built with a different philosophy in mind, where subscription was not the original concept. But then back in the days of server, it was a perpetual licensing concept that we had. We are moving into a cloud first approach where everything is built around a subscription, right? Just like how your Netflix works. You have different plans. You basically go and subscribe to a particular plan and you get charged every month. Or your Disney Hotstar works where you can pay once a year. We are building that capability, which would scale for the next decade or more. So that's sort of my journey from the time I've started working. It's been close to actually over 13 years now. One thing that I'm very happy and satisfied is I've been able to work in different teams and in different technology stacks. I've at some point done C Sharp, Visual Basic. This was back in what 2008, 9, 10, back in the days of my graduation. Then worked on Objective-C, Swift, Kotlin, Java, Node.js. Um, while things like Swift and Objective-C are more on the front end side and the experience side, um, Java and things like TypeScript, or even for that matter, Node, are primarily on the back end. What do I enjoy? I probably enjoy doing more back end work than front end. However, front end is also very satisfying because end of day you see users using what you've built and you actually get the direct feedback if something is done well or if something can be improved. Um, Over the years, having said no to being a manager, eventually transitioned into that role. Um, not because I was forced. That's definitely not the case. But at one point, I felt I can have a larger impact by guiding people do work instead of doing things just by myself. Being able to help and influence people around me to do things, things will move much faster, and then having that impact, or rather the impact quotient would be much higher with this role. So yeah, this is a brief about what I've been doing.
Yep, lovely to know. No, and Steve Jobs, I remember Steve Jobs's quote, which said that people who are individual contributors, great individual contributors, and want to be great individual contributors, end up becoming the best managers because they pick up that role, not because they want to manage people, but it's because they believe that that way they can have greater impact on the business. So yeah, great to know. Uh, let's dive into the job process at Atlassian, right? That's what a lot of people here would be eager to know. That hey, how do I get into Atlassian? There are a couple of openings about hiring principal Java developer remotely from India. Like what the process would be like, what they would expect, and things around that. I'll also share my screen where we have a slide dedicated for that. Yep, over to you.
Sure. So Atlassian has different stages when we look at hiring people. We start with a recruiter screening, like, just to find out if the person that we are looking at is fit for a particular role, has relevant experience. It doesn't have to be experience in terms of using a particular language because we are language agnostic. Our philosophy and what we believe is if you're doing well in one language, you can easily adopt to any other language because at the end of the day, it is just a syntax. What really matters is how you think and how you solve problems. So our coding rounds are designed to evaluate your problem solving skill and your thinking about how you, or rather your process of how you go about solving something. You may see a lot of companies which talk about, or rather, which what do I say? Give a lot of weightage on how fast you can solve a problem. For us, it is not how quick or how fast you solve the problem. It is about how you solve the problem. Like, are you considering all the options? Like, is there a way for optimization? Are you thinking about it? If you're, let's say, we have two rounds, one is code design, the other one is data structures and algorithms. Um, Talking about data structures and algorithms, like, do you know why you're using a particular data structure? Let's say, for example, it is a linked list. Why are you using a linked list? Is there an alternate? What is the trade-off if you use a different data structure other than this? Um, in system design, it's more of, how do you think about building systems that are scalable, um, that meet your requirements, that has, a way for us to think about future requirements and then add it. How do you adopt to the changing requirements? And then, let's say even here, your decision making. For example, in most cases, we will have some or the other form of data store. So how do you choose a data store? How do you choose your caching system? Why do you end up choosing NoSQL database versus a relational database? What are certain factors that you are weighing in when you're making these choices, right? What is the trade-off if you're basically going with one over the other? Being able to think through all of it, justify your choice. And again, in a lot of cases, there is no right or wrong answer, right? And when you're building a system, you can use any database for that matter. But why do you use one and why not the other? What is it that you are thinking, and why do you think this is the best? Given the circumstances, what is needed? And, of course, today with a requirement, this could be the best thing that you're doing, and tomorrow, requirements would change. Like today, in a startup world, when you're building a new product, you may have, like, up to 10,000 users that would not need a huge amount of scaling. But imagine 2 years down the lane, you have 10 million users who are using. At that point, you may have to make a different choice. So, like I said, there is no right answer or wrong answer here. It's more about what is your choice and why are you making that choice. Uh, right. That's what we look at, and that's where a lot of the technical skill is evaluated in your coding round as well as in the system design round. Now, there are two other interviews that we do. One is a management round, the other one is a values round. Management round is more about a conversation in most cases with the hiring manager, but our interview process is also such that we don't want to slow down the process just because only the hiring manager has to take that interview. We've standardized the process, and we have a framework that we use wherein, let's say I'm the hiring manager, and for whatever reason, let's say I'm on vacation and there is an interview going on. We don't want the candidate to be waiting just because I'm not available. Any other engineering manager in the company can actually take that interview, and then we'll essentially evaluate the same set of things. So it's that conversation where we talk about the scale of your assignments, the projects that you've done, the experience you've had. How do you think about uh, you know leadership? What are you thinking, or um, what is your thought process behind learning something new? How do you go about adopting, or how do you go about managing conflict? These are the kind of things that we um, kind of look at when doing management interview. And finally, we have a values interview, which is more or less a behavioral and a culture fit round. So here, Atlassian has five values that we strongly believe in, and like from my experience of being here for about 8 years now, I can definitely and proudly say that it's not just there for the sake of saying, but it is something that is practiced by every individual day in and day out with what we do. So what we do here is we take all the five values and then evaluate uh, the candidate based on what they have done in the past. These are questions which would be, I mean, mostly non-technical, but kind of give the interviewer an insight of the person you are. What is it that you believe in? Um, and how do you see things? How have you tackled certain situations in the past? And um, what are some of the learnings that you have had? How have you applied that? Once you have had some of these experiences, and see if the person that is interviewing is fits the culture that we have at Atlassian. This is, in fact, many people have asked me in the past, what happens if somebody is really good but is does not do well in the values round. So at any point of time, if we find that it's not a cultural fit, and if there is if there are signals that we find that this person is not uh, going to adopt to our culture and how we operate, um, the entire hiring decision will be a no hire. So we don't actually hire anybody. It's just that we want to make sure that people who come to work with us think the way we do, but at the same time, kind of challenge the status quo and then look for improvement. So that's the philosophy that we generally practice, and yeah, it's worked well for us. I think just before we started this session, I was talking about the remote world, and one of the most important things to be able to succeed in the remote world is to have that trust with the people that you're working with. And if you cannot establish that trust, it is a huge problem. Things won't work if you don't really trust the person that you're working.
No, awesome. Those were brilliant insights on how that entire process looked like. First, you want to ensure that the person is able to communicate with the systems and the code in the most efficient way, and then with different people in the company. And that compatibility is there with not just the code and the work, but also with the people and the stakeholders involved. So that is amazing. It's a holistic approach that you guys are taking, which is great. So digging deeper into the second piece, right, where if someone wants to succeed at Atlassian, right? So getting a job is one aspect of it, but then succeeding in that job is completely different. Now, when you work on site, it's pretty easy because you have all the people accessible to you physically. You just go out to them, reach out to them, talk, get things done, and that entire that proximity is there, which kind of helps, right? But in a remote environment where you guys have people from more than 30 countries, right? You guys have people from 31 countries. I'll be in a remote setting. I don't know where my colleagues are going to be from, what time zones they are going to be from. What traits does an individual need to have in order to succeed in a remote environment?
Sure. In fact, even before I talk about the traits that we look from individuals, we also have certain guidelines, within the organization around how we um, how we form or how the org structure would look like, right? Um, if you have a team which is, let's say, in India, and if you have some people working with this particular team, let's say from um, San Francisco, the time zone difference is like either 12 to anywhere between 12 and a half and 13 and a half hours, based on which season you are in and the time of the year. Now, that is not something that will succeed, um, because either your team in India or your team in, or the people who are, in San Francisco will have to extend either work early in the morning or late at night, and that will just, you know, mess up their balance of work and life. So the philosophy or the ideology that we have there is any individual who's going to be hired in a team will need to have a minimum of 4 hours of overlap in terms of time zone. So when we do the hiring, the first thing that we look is, okay, is this person in a particular time zone, and can they spend, some hours in a day during business hours, which is where you can, have meetings and whatever collaboration you need to do, be able to do it without affecting or without having to stretch too thin or too late, and just uh, working out of business hours. That is one. Two, what we also do as an organization here is, while we respect and you know want people to work from anywhere, we also bring people together, which we call as an intentional togetherness for, maybe a few days in a quarter. Um, it could be 2 to 3 days, or sometimes if the gap is like, over 4 months, it could also be like a week long, intentional togetherness in a particular location. Many different time. I mean, in fact, most of the time, we do it here in the Bangalore office, because even if one person is unable to join in person, unable to travel for whatever reason, um, we want them to allow joining these sessions on Zoom remotely. And when we have everybody joining, we also look at opportunities um, to have this intentional togetherness outside in a neutral location where everybody can actually travel and stay together. What this helps with is have that bond between team members, know people at an individual level, on a personal note, know the people that you're working with, um, and establish that, bond in the team. And why is that important? Like I said, trust is the most important factor in all of this. And we've seen that, you know, even if it is once in 6 months that you actually meet, it enhances the trust factor. by manyfold within the team and with the individuals. Other than that, from a systemic perspective, we encourage people to be actually very open. Um, for that matter, most of the people that I work with, my colleagues, my team members, know my daughter. They know what time she comes from school. I have to go pick her up from the school bus, give her lunch sometimes when, I don't have my parents at home or my wife is at work. Um, Given that, we are also remote, it gives flexibility to do other things. So she goes for a swimming class 3 days a week, for a dance class 2 days a week. So um, they also know what time these things are, and then I keep it transparent, right? um, Whenever I'm doing work, I concentrate on the work, but then of course when I have to step out, I tell them, I have to drop my daughter to the swimming class, I have to take her there, then I'll come back. I mean, I don't mind taking a meeting if there is something that is important from sitting in the swimming class, in the swimming pool, or even outside there is a lawn. That's perfectly fine. Being open about what is happening is important. I also have a 2-year-old daughter. She comes and sits on my table at times when I'm in meetings, and it's in a way good that people on the other side also feel it is human and it is natural, right? And there are moments of laughter, and then we share. They talk to her, she talks to them. This happens. Um, Being transparent and being open of what is happening in your life is very important. Um, so people have to step out for various different reasons. Like we just encourage people to say, or rather at least drop a note on a Slack channel which is open to the entire team that you're away for, let's say an hour. There are multiple things which happen and you have to go out for things, right? Like that's fine. Setting the expectation that you are available, you're not available is important, because let's say if somebody is looking for help with something that you're doing or that they are doing, and you are the expert on that, and not knowing whether you're there or not, if you don't respond, doesn't help, right? And in certain cases, we have had, let's say, people returning from maternity leaves. In those cases as well, we make it easy for people to return back to work. Like, I've had somebody on my team who returned, and then, for the first 2 weeks, they were working only for 3 days, like alternate days, so that, they can set a routine for their kid, be able to support them when needed, um, and then slowly, ramp up. And we understand that they have to step out. Sometimes, somebody's health is unwell. You have to step out. You have to take somebody to the doctor. These things are very natural. It is just that, um, are you able to tell what you need to tell, or what is the fact, and then you know be able to give that bit of transparency to the team. And that also is possible when you feel that psychological safety in the team that you're working in. So that's how we do it. And like I said, it is not something that can change overnight. This is a process. We have learned a lot during the COVID lockdown, when we did not have an option. At least the benefit that we had was, a lot of teams in Atlassian were remote even before COVID actually happened. Um, so when we acquired Trello, Trello was a completely remote team. They had one office in New York, but a lot of people working for Trello were not in New York, were in different cities, different parts of the world. And having seen how they operate, it really helped us adopt sooner when COVID started. And beyond that, there were also a lot of other teams where we had specifically called out that these teams are remote eligible and you can work from anywhere. Um, Another thing which really helps when it comes to remote is um, being able to respect people's preferences. As in, there was a time when some people would be in office. I'm talking about this even before COVID. Um, if one person used to be remote, we would actually, even if we are in the office, most of the people would actually join from their laptops in different places of the office. Because what typically happens is you are in a conference room and then only one person is remote. There is a lot of conversation which is happening just within the room, which the other person may not be able to hear, may not have the context. So until we were able to, set some, um, or change the mindset of people that, you need to respect that there is somebody who is remote and who may not hear everything that you're actually speaking or the context that you have. Um, we asked people to, you know, join from their own laptops so that you understand what it takes for somebody who's not here in the office in the same physical space, um, what they feel when things are happening, and every conversation would happen on Zoom itself. So that's one thing that we did. The other one was you know usage of tools, and certain changes in process. Uh, I'll give examples. For example, I mean, one thing that we started doing is, let's say you need to have a meeting. Make sure that you have an agenda that you put on the calendar so that people know what is it that is being discussed. If there is something that needs brainstorming, put it on a Confluence page earlier and include a link to the page so that people can come prepared to the meeting. Because in office, it is easy. You'll talk to another colleague of yours, and you'll be able to share some context, even though at a high level. But the person coming into a meeting would not be entirely blind or would not be entirely new. Um, but with remote, you cannot do that. Either you end up having a meeting with them on Zoom to explain things or to even give that high level context, or uh, and if you're doing that, you may as well bring everybody in. And to be efficient, sharing agenda, sharing points that we want to discuss, or if there is more detail, let's say you have to make a decision. We have, like Richard was mentioning, a lot of playbooks and templates that are there on our website, which can be used. We have this framework called DAISY, Decision Action, Communication, and interaction. So we created a template for it, and in the template you basically put down different options that you're considering, and with that you also put what is your recommendation, how do you actually go, why are you recommending something, right? So it becomes easy for people to consume this information asynchronously, and when you come to a meeting, it's more about, hey, you've read this document, these are the options that we are considering, what is your opinion? Should we go with this? Okay, if we don't want to go with this, why? What do you recommend? Do you prefer choosing something else, or should we actually add another option? Like these are the ways in which we were able to scale. And of course, for people, like I said, you know, assume positive intent, right? When you don't know somebody, when you're interacting with people for the first time, um, and you feel something is, oh, I was expecting something and there is something else here. Don't judge the person. Assume positive intent and maybe seek to understand. Like, why is it something different while I was expecting something else? And you will find the answer and the justification for that. So that's how, um, over the last, I would say between 2017 and 2022, we were able to build a bunch of processes, practices with which we were able to, scale people and scale our system as well.
That's awesome, Manju. Yep. Coming to the questions that people are asking in this last section of 30 minutes, right? We could see a few questions, and one of them, which was very candidly put out, was how do I get a high paying remote job, right? So that is kind of an aspiration of a lot of people, right? Everyone wants a remote job to be with their families, manage between their work and life, don't want to waste their time in commute and all, right? But in this same category, there are a lot of talents applying for this limited set of jobs in limited top remote brands, right? So if someone wants to get that job, what are the skills that person need to possess in order to aspire for such a job?
Sure. I'll give my perspective from the hiring that we have been doing at Atlassian. One, be good at what you're doing, which basically means your fundamentals should be strong. Um, you know, let's say you're working on Java, make sure that you have the right skills with Java. You know what is expected at your experience level and the level that you're applying for, right? You may be applying for a principal engineer role. Um, Different organizations have different expectations from a principal engineer. Um, and in fact, to be very honest, uh, in my opinion, of course, principal engineer, I would categorize them into in three ways. One, somebody who's a deep engineer, like they go technically very deep into systems, the language. There is a senior architect at Atlassian, based out of Sydney. He can actually tell you what code you have written by looking at the bytecode. Like he's a deep engineer, and you give him the compiled thing, and then essentially your bytecode, which gets generated while you're actually deploying. He would read that, and he would tell you, "This is what you've written in Java." He can go into that level of depth, and he has that understanding. Right? That's one category. The second category is you know tech leads who can do a lot of stakeholder management, coordination between teams. Assume you're in a program or a project which needs multiple different teams, multiple products to deliver something meaningful to the customer. You need to be able to work with people in different teams, bring them onto the same level of understanding of what is it that we need to build, what are the contracts that we are agreeing to at an API level. um, is this the right design to be using, or do we need to do something else, or can we optimize? Kind of help teams set the SLOs, like okay, in terms of latency, what is it that is acceptable? 30 milliseconds, 60 milliseconds, or 100 milliseconds? What should this be in terms of how should it be performing? Right, defining that, things at that level, and being able to work with other engineers on the team, and being responsible for the delivery. That's the second category of principal engineer. The third one is more of a product engineer, right? Where you basically are looking through what is there in the product today, what is it that you could be building, how do you basically work with product managers, and they have a vision, you contribute to that vision, and what is feasible from the vision, like what is the MVP that I can have, today to be the first in the market? And how can I evolve my MVP into something that is deliverable, that is something that can be used? I mean, some people may ask, isn't this the role of a product manager? And then, they define the vision and do everything. Yes, product managers sometimes also can become very idealistic and then say, this is what I want in the product. However, they would not look at the feasibility of technology. Like, you may be on a particular platform which may not support something, but at the same time, you cannot entirely revamp your entire platform to build what the product is asking, because that may take a year. And, your train would have left the station if you wait for a year in today's world to bring out a product. You cannot be late. You cannot say that I will build the best product, the perfect product. And then if you don't have users who want to use it, I mean, like, you've just burned 1 year of your runway from the company, right? So you need people who can um, think through these possibilities and work with product, work with engineering, work with the engineers and the team to define what is it that you've got to build. And there will also be overlaps of all these things. You could have a person who is also a tech lead, but also, does product engineering. You could have somebody who's a product engineer, but also very deep as a deep engineer. One, understand what is the expectation of the role that you're actually applying to, right? And also, just don't apply to something that you don't believe, or you are actually not, something that's not your strength. If you're a deep engineer and then you're applying for a role which needs to play a tech lead, you're not going to succeed as a deep engineer. Like, some people are very shy, some people are introverts, they don't like interaction with a lot of people all the time. Not that they don't talk to people, but they would prefer working in smaller groups and having an impact with the work that they are doing, whereas tech leads are expected to be doing a lot of coordination and communication. That becomes very important. So understanding what is needed is very important. And with the when you have the right skills, when you are able to, I mean, the other thing is, be yourself. Like, in the interviews as well, let's say if you don't know something, say I probably, I mean, I don't know. This is an area that I've not worked on, or this is something that I don't have experience in. This happens a lot in the system design interviews when we take, right? For example, we ask the candidate, let's say from the earlier example, you picked MongoDB. Why have you picked MongoDB? Um, Sometimes candidates just talk about, oh, this, that, etc., 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 and the interviewer will be easily able to figure out that you're just giving high level terms and catchwords just to impress somebody. If you've only worked on MongoDB and not necessarily on something else, and you don't have the expertise on that, tell that. That's totally fine. Like, MongoDB is where my strength is. This is where I have worked on, and these are the benefits that I'm going to get from it, which is why I will use it, and that's fine. So don't cook up stories, and just don't tell because you have to answer a question. Um, and when it comes to moving on with the interview itself, from an Atlassian perspective, managerial interview or a values interview, be honest about things. Let's say there are sometimes we ask this question, like, tell me about a situation where you've been criticized, or where something that you have worked and built has not worked, or your project has failed, or let's say you've let the customer down. um, Sometimes people feel, oh, should I tell or not tell what I've done or what has happened? It is okay. Own your mistake, because you would have learned something from it. And we are looking at the same thing. Like, nobody is perfect and nobody does everything perfectly. Mistakes happen, and we just want to understand what is the mistake that you did and how did you learn and correct those mistakes, right? So be candid about things and talk about it. At the end of the day, ownership and accountability is something that is very important when it comes to any remote job. As long as you're able to show that to the interviewer that you're ready to take ownership of things and you're accountable for it, they will believe in you.
Awesome. Though that is great to know. A lot of people try to oversell themselves, and then it kind of doesn't work out in their favor. And it's also because you have that in the back of your mind that, hey, you are applying for a great brand. Everyone else would be doing really amazing out there. A lot of applicants would also be doing great, so I also need to answer everything being asked. But that's not true, right? We just have to be
Yeah.
ourselves, and we have to upskill ourselves to be at that level where then we can play in that same league as well. We have another question from Avadesh. He has a very good question, right? What is the level of DSA knowledge that a good front-end developer should have in order to be so that's one question. And then there's also another follow-up question from one of our participants who says that as a fresher, what's your expectation? What's your expectation from someone at a mid-level, 3 to 5 years? And then what are your expectations for someone who is at 8 years of experience or so? So those are two questions from the chat.
Sure. What was the first question? Sorry.
Yeah,
What
first
is
question was
the
for a front-end developer, how much
okay,
DSA
front end
he should
developer?
have. Yeah.
Um, Look, unless you are like at a, I mean, I hate to say that, but even if you are at an architect level, data structures is something that is basic and fundamental that you should have. You may ask why, what am I going to use it for? Um, I'm sure many of you have looked it up. One of the questions that we ask is build a snake game, right? Like if you don't know what data structure will help you, kind of um, create that game and what algorithm would make it uh, uh, appealing or performant enough, it becomes a little difficult. Again, um, I would also not recommend people to be um, kind of stuck to only front end. I will want to do this. My recommendation would be, yes, you build your expertise in front end, but also understand how you build a back end, right? um, we build a lot of BFFs, which is backend for front ends, wherein it's not somebody who's going to write code in Java or something else and then give you that. Um, as a developer who's designing the experience, you can also build. You would also be expected to build the backend of it, maybe in TypeScript or in Node, whatever you feel comfortable. And at that point, you have to make certain decisions and choice. So basic understanding and being able to know how things work and fundamentals of why you're doing something is necessary at any level. Now to answer the second question, which is what is the expectation at different levels, fresher to maybe 8+ years or 10 years and beyond. At the entry level, which is freshers, whether it is a grad or even an intern, the most important thing that we would look for is what have you done other than just your academics? Do you have any experience? Have you tried building anything and what your experience has been? And how flexible are you with respect to learning and adopting to something that you don't know? In college, everybody learns C, C++. When we go to in campuses to do interviews, every single candidate writes their code in C++. And that is the most easiest for them from a data structures point of view because they know the ins and out, they've practiced on lead code and all different platforms. Um, The differentiator there is, can you think of, or have you even thought of building something? And what has your experience been if you've tried? Have you learned something new? How did you go about learning it? What worked, what did not work, right? As long as somebody is able to demonstrate that they have a urge to learn, and they would adopt to changing situations or change in language. You may be in a team today which works on Java. 2 years down the lane, you may go to another team or a product which is working on Python. Um, 2 years down the lane, you may actually go and work on something different where you're using, let's say, R to build, machine learning models and train the models and all that stuff. Or you may, go and do some data analytics where you will use SQL predominantly. So, like, one, your interest would change, and basically, based on your interest in what you want to do, you would start doing different things. Are you up for that? Are you up for a change? Right? I mean, like I said myself, I've done coding in various different languages. Like, did I have to do that? No, because I was interested in learning different things, and then I wanted to try a variety of stuff, so I did that. Um, Sometimes it could also be because the team that you're in has a different need. So that's an important trait that we look for at all levels, of course, but more specifically when we talk about fresh graduates. Now, at, let's say, 3 to 5 years and 8+ years, what we look for is what it's two ways. How much breadth of knowledge do you have? And when, let's say, like the person was asking, for a front end engineer, what do you look for, or how critical is DS and algorithms? What is the experience that you have built for the role that you have applied? As a front end engineer, like, how good are you in JavaScript? What different things have you done? Um, how much do you know? And, like, it's not just always about building something from scratch. It is, maybe 15 to 20% of time that somebody joining any organization, for that matter, would build something from scratch. How can you take an existing code, understand that, and build on top of it, right? That's what is important. 8+ years, most of what is there for 3 to 5 years, but of course, here we would go more in depth of how have you been able to scale systems? How have you been able to influence your team or your organization make technical choices and decisions? Because as you grow up in your career, it is not always code that you write. You will have to deal with people, whether you are an individual contributor or a manager or whatever it is. Day in and day out, you're working with people. How much of a positive influence can you have on the people that you're working with, right? That becomes important. And of course, your technical skills is absolutely necessary. And then, even if I look at uh, interviews, um, we expect more complexity to be solved at each level, from an SDE 1 to a 2, or a senior engineer or a staff engineer. The complexity of problems that you solve and how much you can do varies. So that's something that we would look at.
Awesome. So it's all about that ability to solve problem at whichever level you are, and then having
Right.
that deep understanding that if I am doing something, why am I doing something? What is the best possible way in which that end result can be achieved, and continuously improving upon one's skill. That's great. So let's see if let's say if I am an engineer, and I want to crack a job at Atlassian, and I want to be prepared for that, right? So I want to be good at cracking DSA problems. I want to be good at system designing. What are some of the resources available that you would recommend that I should go to learn from? Any specific YouTube channels, any specific tech blogs that you would want me to go to and learn? Some insights on the resources available and the ones that you recommend.
I think you know most people typically go to for especially for coding interviews. I think they would go to lead code and then practice various different complexities and levels. Um, while that's fine, I think what we look at is solving realistic problems, right? It's not about how good you are and how efficiently can you or how quickly can you solve something. It's more about how do you apply the knowledge you have. One of the questions we've asked in the past is a classic rate limiting problem. I mean, it's the way we also talk about is, Jira is a system that needs to scale at different levels. So, what do you do if somebody is trying to abuse your system by, loading it with um, millions of requests per minute? So, um, solving real world problems is what we would actually be very focused on. And uh, I wouldn't say there is a particular YouTube channel or somewhere that you could go and get all of this information. It's more about, have you done this in the past? Do you know about how to do this and how well you were able to do it? Um, and in fact, you know, from a knowledge perspective, I would say there are great blogs from Netflix engineering, Uber engineering, Atlassian's own engineering blogs. Um, Martin Fowler is one person that I also follow and then read his blogs that he writes, especially on domain-driven design and architecture. Um, that's a great resource. Um, there are books that in fact, recommend for design thinking and architectural principles, especially around microservices, um, again, domain-driven design, different design patterns for that matter, what to apply where, and how do you evaluate all of that. Uh, yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Awesome. No, that's so good. There are a lot of blogs that people I have come across read, like Geeks for Geeks and so on so forth. But yeah, when there's a lamp in front of you, why look for elsewhere? Just go to the blogs that Atlassian has, engineering blogs, and of Netflix and Uber, and those would be great sources to refer to. So yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, we have a few more questions, but I think we'll take them on Discord, considering the time that we have. And would really love to take this moment to thank you on behalf of everyone who joined and who got amazing insights. We are really grateful to have you, and despite such a busy schedule, you spared so much time for us. You walked us through the process. You walked us through the type of questions that you asked for. You covered what is there in the values around and so on and so forth. So really appreciate your time, your inputs. Looking forward to connecting with you on Discord. And yeah, would encourage everyone listening to join our Discord. We'll share the details and we'll have this conversation there. So thank you, Manju. Really appreciate.
Thank you, Richard. I thank you for the opportunity to be here and then speak to the amazing people in your community. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. Thanks a ton, Manju. Uh, Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care. Take care, everyone.